Hello everyone, today I will explain you in depth the highly asked question in interview as a backend developer. And in this video, I have divided the content in 3 levels. The level 1 contains easy but important questions. So let's start. The interviewer wants to check your fundamentals, how the internet request actually works. So the first highly asked question is, what actually happens when someone type the URL and press the enter? So what is your answer for this particular question? A lot of students thinks I enter the URL and request goes to server and server send the page back. That's not wrong, but it's very shallow answer to actually give in the interview. In real production system, there is several things happening in between, and today I'll walk you through every single step. So the step 1 is DNS. First, the browser need to find out where the website actually lives. You typed something like www.example.com, but computers don't talk to each other using your host name. They talk using IP address. So the browser performs something called DNS lookup. It converts that host name into an IP address. In simple word, DNS is answering one question, which IP address belongs to this domain. So the next step is TCP connection. Once we have the IP address, the browser need to actually connect to the server. Think of it like, okay, I know where the server lives. So the step 3 is TLS handshake. Now if we using HTTPS, which almost every website does today, client and server perform a TLS handshake. This is where both sides agree on encryption and set up a secure channel. Step 4 is HTTP request. Now finally, the browser send an actual HTTP request. For example, a GET request like /product and the host name example.com we already taken. In simple word, the browser is saying, hey server, I want the /products resource. The step 5th is load balancer. It may be, but it is must be. In real production environment, there actually a load balancer sitting in front of your application. Manage all the resources. After that, step 6, application server. Now the request finally reach our application. Let's say we using a Spring Boot. The application looks at the request get /products and Spring routes mechanism figures out which controller and method should handle it. After mapping all this code, this is the point where our actual application code starts running. The step 7 is cache and database. Now the application might need some data. The step 8 is the response. The application build an HTTP response, something like this in JSON, and this response travels all the way back through the system to the browser, and the browser uses it to render the page. The complete picture is browser, DNS, IP address, TCP, TLS, HTTP request goes to the load balancer moves to the application server finds the controller serves, then HTTP response generated, the browser get that response.
So after the internet and how the request works, the next high probability question is, what is RESTful API? What are the core principles? A RESTful API is an architectural style for designing web services. It allows different computer systems to talk each other over the internet using HTTP protocol. Think of it like a translator sitting between a client and a server, just like a mobile phone between the two people. And it takes the data and format it in a structured layout, most commonly JSON. Now, the core principle are, the number 1 principle is stateless. The server saves no data. Every single request must carry all the identity and data credentials need to process it. The second point is client-server separation. The third point is cacheability. The fourth is uniform interface. URL should focus on nouns, not verbs. So it should be slash products, not something like slash get all products. This keeps navigation consistent and predictable across the entire system. Once you explain the REST principle, the very next question interviewer loves asking is, what is the difference between get, post, put, patch, and delete? This checks whether you actually understand HTTP methods and you just been calling API without knowing what happened underneath. Get is used for read, post is used for creating the new resource, put is used for updating the resource, and patch is used for updating the resource but only partially. Delete is simply remove the resource.
Now we are covering HTTP methods. The next usual question comes on status code. What is the difference between 401 and 403, 404 and 500? These are all HTTP status code. An interviewer asks this because a lot of developers just don't know which kind of error it actually is. And that matters a lot when you are debugging. So let's explain it. 400 is the bad request, means the problem is from the request itself. 401 is unauthorized, means the client have not proved who they are. 403 is forbidden and different. Here is the server know exactly who you are, but you simply don't have permission to access that resource. Then 404 is the not found. For example, you are checking the product /001, but 001 product does not exist. So it provide you 404 not found error. 500 is internal server error. Means the something broken in the server side while the processing perfectly a valid request. Next, a very common question. What is the difference between path parameter, query parameter and the request body? Ways of sending data to the server, but each one is used for different purpose. Path parameter are path of URL itself and they identify a specific resource. For example, /product/101. The 101 is the path parameter. It tells the server exactly which product you want. Query parameter comes after a question mark in the URL and they are mainly used for filtering, sorting or optional settings. For example, /product category is equal to electronics. So here category are query parameter. They are optional and they don't identify a specific resource. They just modify how the result should be written. The request body is used to send large or more complex data. For example, when you are creating a new product, you don't put all the product details in the URL. You send them as JSON inside the request body. It means for data that's too big or too structured to fit cleanly in the URL. What is CORS and why does it exist? CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. To understand CORS, you first need to understand the problem it solved by default browser, following something called same origin policy. This means web page run on one domain, say myapp.com, is not allowed to make requests to a different domain, says api.otherapp.com, unless that other domain explicitly allow it. This restriction exists purely for security. Without it, any malicious website you accidentally open could silently make requests to your bank API or your email in the background using your logged in session without your knowledge. So CORS is basically a permission system that server tells the browser through a specific response header like access control allow origin. When your frontend running on the domain trying to call the backend running on the same domain, the browser first check with the server. Hey, is their frontend allow you to talk to you? And only if the server say yes, does the browser allow the request go through. So in simple word, CORS exists to protect user from malicious cross-domain requests while still allowing legitimate front-end applications to safely talk to the backend API hosted on different domain. Now the most important expected question is the middleware. What is a middleware? So you can reply middleware is a piece of code sit between the request and the final response. After that, what is dependency injection? Dependency injection is design pattern where class does not create object. It need by itself. What is the difference between
synchronous and asynchronous execution. Synchronous execution is simply you can say each line wait for the previous one to finish. And asynchronous execution, a task can start and the program moves on to the next line without waiting and comes back to handle the result once it's ready. What is a stateless server? A stateless server doesn't store any information about previous request. What is session? Session is a way of the server to remember user across multiple requests. When you logged in, server creates a session and stores same data about you, usually on the server side. What about database? The first important expectation is the primary key. What is primary key? So you can say simply a set of columns that uniquely identify each row in a table. What about foreign key? The foreign key is a column in the table that points to the primary key of another table. It's how relationship built tables can create. What about index? An index is the data structure that helps the database find row faster without scanning the entire table. Think of it like the index page at the back of the book. Instead of reading every page, you jump straight forward. What is normalization? Normalization is the simple process of organizing data tables to reduce data duplication, keeping the data consistent. That's all. One more expected question is, what is the difference between SQL and no SQL? A lot of people ask this question. The SQL, you can say simply structured table, and they're stored in a fixed schema, and the relationships are defined using key. And on the other hand, NoSQL database are no relationship. They store data more flexible like document, key, value pairs, or graphs. They don't require a fixed schema. What is a database? Transaction. Transaction is a group of database operations that are executed as a single unit. Either all succeed or none of them do. After that transaction, the more expected question, have you know asset properties? So you can clearly say all these properties: atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability.